Hello, and welcome back to another video. For today's video, we are going back 13 months to June 2024, when I took my first spring trip to Yellowstone National Park. From owls to grizzly bears to badgers, I was able to film life in Yellowstone at its most spectacular, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. The morning of May 30th, 2024, we set out on what would be a 14-hour drive from my home in Canada to Gardner, Montana. I also want to give a shout out to my dad who accompanied me on this trip, handled a large portion of the driving, and put his expert wildlife skills to work in the park. It is very much appreciated. That night, as we rolled into Gardner in the foothills of Yellowstone, I had absolutely no idea the spectacles that awaited me in the coming days. As we headed in for our first morning in the park, I knew exactly where I wanted to go first, the place that is often referred to as the Serengeti of North America, Lamar Valley. Soon after arriving in the valley, I spotted this young bull moose grazing just off the roadside. But then I was anxious to keep moving down the valley, and I'm glad we did, because I got to see a North American badger family for the very first time. This mother and her 3 young cubs put on a show for us, playing in the cool morning air just outside of their den. Spring in Yellowstone is a busy time for everyone. Even these swifts were making use of the washroom overhangs to build their nests on. After a few hours in Lamar, we decided to make our way to Canyon Village, but it wasn't long before we were pulling over to look at more wildlife. This time, it was a pair of sandhill cranes foraging with their 2 young colts. As we continued the drive, it wasn't long before we hit our first bear jam of the trip. We watched from a safe distance of over 100 yards as this juvenile grizzly feasted on the fresh spring grass. After driving around Canyon Village and Hayden Valley yielded no more sightings, we decided to head back to Lamar for the afternoon. But on our way there, as we crossed over the Lamar River, I spotted one of the most incredible wildlife behaviors I have ever seen. This wet badger was heading up the bank, rolling in the sand to dry its fur, when it turned around and did something I never expected to see. We spent the rest of the afternoon on a short hike along Slough Creek, where we found plenty of evidence of bears. We then returned to Lamar Valley for the evening. That evening brought one of the most epic wildlife encounters of my career. We watched as a herd of bison crossed the Lamar River with their newborn calves. The young calves struggled against the strong current, which was magnified by the spring melt, as their mothers did their best to support them by swimming upstream and blocking as much current as they could. After an incredible first day, it was time to head back to the hotel for the night. But of course, there was no avoiding Yellowstone's most common traffic jam. The next morning was all about wolves. We were up and into the park before the sun came up, where we joined the crowd of wolf watchers at the Junction Butte Pack's summer den site just before 5:30 a.m. And it wasn't long before the wolves revealed themselves. To finish the morning, we decided to get out on foot and take a hike through Lamar Valley. Following our hike, we drove back towards Mammoth Hot Springs for lunch. But you can never get too far in Yellowstone without seeing a bear. With the harsh midday light making photos difficult, we moved on quickly to Mammoth. But even in the bustling town, we came across another iconic species of the park. But that will have to wait until next time. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to keep an eye out for part 2, where we wrap up the last day and a half of the trip with Yellowstone's most iconic species, grizzly bears.